The three theorems of psychohistorical quantitativity. The population under scrutiny is oblivious to the existence of the science of psychohistory. The time periods dealt with are in the region of 3 generations. The population must be in the billions for a statistical probability to have psychohistorical validity.
Hello and welcome to Foundation Analysis, Episode 3, The Mathematicians Ghost. I am your host, Brent Stewart, and of course, spoilers. So we're just going to roll right into it. So this episode kicks off with a great section at the beginning about kind of like the life cycle of Empire and the brothers, or more specifically centered around the current dusk and how he is phasing out. There's some fantastic moments before that with Dem and Cleon the First and the space elevator being constructed. But there's some really interesting stuff. I bring up the space elevator because the end of the whole sort of tradition or last day ceremony is ended with the final gift, which is a promise from Brother Day and Brother Dawn to make a legacy for Brother Dusk in honor of Cleon the First, which is, kind of the all is one thing. And so he is very clearly moved by it. Fantastic acting. So after that, we have Dusk awakening in their sleep to a lullaby, and they sneak into the clone chamber, we'll call it, for Cleon. And apparently Cleon is not allowed to, none of them are allowed to go in there to see, their next generations. And he heads out after hearing this enchanting lullaby that, he waxes a little poetic of, is this the first time I heard it? And he can't sleep, so he decides to give a gift to the new dawn and makes a lovely mural on the wall of the crib that will soon have the new Brother Dawn, and falls asleep on the ground. And Dem finds him asleep there, and boy can she lift. No problem picking up Brother Dusk and just taking him to bed. And when she says goodnight to him, there's a little bit of back and forth, which is absolutely fantastic. And the really heartfelt, moving line from Dem, which is, Dusk asks if, we're ever enough because we're just a shadow, we're just a copy. And she replies, it's that they are enough. The problem is that they always leave, which is heartfelt and sad and full of this pathos. And you're making us feel for a robot more than the human characters. How dare you, sir? So we awaken with Brother Darkness now. We have the goodbye ceremony, and Dem Roselle confronts and pushes Darkness forward when there is a moment when they are hesitant because Brother Day is crying and he wishes to comfort the child. And he is resplendent in his robes for his ascension. And it turns out that the end of the life cycle is to be atomized by some sort of radiation chamber, we'll say. And what is quite interesting is Dem then takes some of the ashes, we'll call it, and marks Brother Dawn. So, there's this neat sort of weird life cycle and continuation, and it is interesting. So we then come to Terminus and the landing and the introduction of the monolith and the founding of the Foundation and people starting to expand and establish themselves. And then we get to the description of Salvor and the vault and testing it and how they are special and how they can get right up underneath it. And eventually that leads to the current day where Salvor is testing the vault and eventually comes back and confides in her dad that the field is expanding, which is interesting and timing wise quite remarkable. And in order to impart this information to her mother, She heads out to the encyclopedia meeting at the recommendation / behest of her father. And it's quite an interesting scene that we get to see because they are deciding, again, they are choosing what to preserve. But in this case, it is, how do we keep time? You know, there's a question about the mechanics of this water clock versus the sundial, and how the sundial is more reliable versus the water clock, even though it is more precise. And that is, you know, an absolutely fair and interesting question. And where you draw those lines are cultural questions that you have to account for or should take into consideration when you are looking at the span of time, and also when you are comparing other cultures. And you know, like, is this what we actually think it is? Because needs, necessities, the mother of invention, etc., etc. And then, of course, you know, her mother needs some proof of the expansion, and so they head out to the vault, and there's, you know, that lovely little walk forward with a nosebleed. It's like, okay, yeah, I believe you. Yeah, this is no good. And then we have Hugo arriving. Hugo is a trader and likes to travel the stars a lot of times in cryo, because, you know, he has a slow ship because he's not Imperial. And he interacts with a bunch of kids when he lands, which is adorable and just establishes him as a character and a good guy and someone we want to like. And then eventually heads out to connect with Salvor. And we establish quite quickly that they have a relationship and have had one for quite some time. And it is quite charming and comfortable looking. And I don't know, it's really nice. It looks cute, looks adorable. And unfortunately, it isn't quite enough, because she awakens in the night and goes for a walk to clear her head and ends up chasing a image of a child into the scuttled ship, and ends up going through the wreck, and we get to see it, which it looks really good and cool, and it is exposed to the elements, so there's like bits of snow going around everywhere, and eventually cornering what she believes is a kid, and turns out to be something much more dangerous. But as it resolves itself, she looks in the right direction and sees ships coming in. So, of course, there is a meeting about the ships landing on Terminus, because it is Imperial space, and therefore nobody is supposed to show up unannounced. And the council generally is like, okay, well, what do we do? What is the procedure? We contact the Empire. Let's do that. Okay, well, we have to wait for the window. Oh, great. And quite an interesting thing is Salvor's mom heads into their storage closet and pulls out the Prime Radiant, which they try to use, and with no success. But that's where that went, and so that might be important to keep track of, because it's supposed to have all the calculations, and so kind of an important thing. Then, of course, we have a scene with Hugo where he is offered the chance to leave before these other 3 ships will arrive, and he's like, no. And then Salvor heads out for a walk again, and again is pulled into the derelict ship by the visage of a child. And this time they are ambushed, trying to save Mabel, the Bishop Claw, from the first time they went in. So, and that is where we leave off with the cliffhanger, specifically Salvor at Arrow Point. This project is supported by the On the Origin of Battlemechs podcast Patreon. If you enjoy it and want to hear more of my discussion of Foundation, please let me know and possibly give your support there. Special thanks to my friend Treble for the intro and outro.
Don't you see? It's galaxy-wide. It's a worship of the past, a deterioration, a stagnation.